with contact information. Finally, save the dates for our monthly programs on the second Monday of each month. Next month on March 10th with the San Jose Fire Chief, Robert Sapien. And the following month on April 14th with Mayor Matt Mahan, delivering his budget. Matt will share the stage with a subset of Almaden Valley High School Science Fair students who will present a lightning round of their projects from the 2025 Santa Clara County Science Fair. Little geniuses among us. Here to introduce you to this evening's speaker, Councilman Casey, is AVCA board member Nolan Mascareñas. Nolan has served on the City of San Jose's Youth Commission as D10 representative. He is the leader of the D10 Youth Leadership Coalition, and you'll be surprised to learn that Nolan is still in high school. He's a senior at Branham High because he brings to us unusual and welcome maturity and poise. Nolan.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce Councilmember George Casey. George has been a part of this community for nearly his entire life. He moved to District 10 at the age of 5, grew up in Santa Teresa, spent 35 years in Almaden, and is now raising his family in the West Santa Teresa foothills. He attended Santa Teresa Elementary, Burnell Intermediate, and Bellarmine College Prep before continuing his education at Santa Clara University, where he earned his undergraduate and law degrees. He also holds a master's degree in urban planning from San Jose State and a master's degree in real estate from UC Berkeley. With a background in law, urban planning, and real estate, George has spent his career focused on how cities grow and develop. After working at a major law firm, he transitioned into the startup world as senior counsel. He later served as a San Jose planning commissioner, where he worked on housing policies and urban planning issues, advocating for responsible growth that balances the city's need for development with the characters of its neighborhoods. Elected in November as the District 10 council member, George is now focused on addressing key issues such as housing, transportation, public safety, and economic development. He brings a strong commitment to thoughtful policymaking and a deep understanding of the challenges and opportunities facing San Jose. Please join me in welcoming Councilmember George Casey.
Thank you, Nolan. Very impressive young man. I've had the opportunity to see him for a couple of years, seeing more friendly faces walk in, see a bunch here in the audience too. I want to thank each of you for coming out. It shows how civically engaged you guys are. It's kind of a cold night. It's a little bit later in the evening, so I really do appreciate the effort. I want to thank the AVCA, the D10 Leadership Coalition, the Almaden Senior Association, all great groups. We're very fortunate to live in this community where folks actually do care. I have been on the council for a couple months, and I can tell you the statistics came out, which district has the most calls from constituents. And D10, as it turns out, more than doubled second place. So we are, by numbers, the most civically engaged district. Yeah, yeah, we care. We care a lot. We do. Well, I appreciate you guys coming out. We have a slide deck here. I'm going to introduce 3 topics that'll be discussed. There'll be a Q&A period afterwards. You guys can feel free to ask any questions during that time. I'll stop after each section, and then if you can ask questions related to that particular section, I'd appreciate it. And we'll keep. I see Charles too. I see someone else. Next slide, please. So the areas I'll be discussing today are land use, in particular, the builder's remedy. I don't know if you folks have heard about that. There's a number of builder's remedy, Sandra. There's a number of builder's remedy projects that are coming down the pike in our D10 proper, as well as the county that surrounds us. I'll also discuss briefly the budget. We're in the early stages of budget discussions right now, but I'll give you a glimpse in terms of what we're dealing with. I don't want to spoil it, but we're dealing with a budget deficit that we're going to have to overcome. And finally, fire preparedness. I know all of you have been aware of what's going on down in Southern California, and there's a lot of concern here. And there should be for us in particular, given our proximity to the foothills. A similar scenario could potentially happen. And so I'll describe to you what the city is doing, what the state is doing, and then some expectations for what we can do individually and as neighborhood associations and as a district as a whole. Next slide, please. So I'll try to provide some context. Land use and zoning historically has been at the local level. Cities were able to determine what goes where. And this was a byproduct of a time when slaughterhouses, for example, would have been right next door to an elementary school or to a home. And so the cities wanted to figure out a way to separate uses. And they went through a lot of court cases. And it was found that cities, through the police powers, had the right to designate where projects go and how high they can be and what they can do. There's been a change in that lately. The state is actually wresting away a lot of our control in terms of land use. And that's a byproduct of the fact that they don't believe we're building housing as quickly as we should. And there's some truth to that. There's some smaller locales like Palo Alto, Saratoga that have fought any type of growth. The way California operates is there's HCD, the Housing and Community Development, and they determine every 8 years how many homes each city is supposed to develop. So they determined San Jose, for example, is supposed to build 62,000 homes. And we need to plan for that. And so our land use constitutional document is our general plan. And in the general plan, there's a housing element. And every 8 years, that housing element has to be updated to reflect what the state wants us to do in terms of capacity. If you turn that housing element in late, there's a penalty, and that's where the builder's remedy comes in. If you turn your housing element in late and it hasn't been certified by the HCD, then a developer can file to have any project he wants to, as far as it has to be a housing project with 20% low income or affordable. But the way it was in 2024, there was no density limit too. So you could conceivably have a 500 or 5,000 unit project someplace where you once couldn't develop anything. And the land use laws didn't apply and the zoning regulations didn't apply. This was meant to be a penalty for municipalities who didn't turn in their housing element in time. So if you'll see here, yeah, unlimited density, and that was an issue. And so cities fought back. Next slide, please. And so cities, your housing element had to be certified by the state. And what cities said is basically they were self-certifying and that their housing element was done. And to stop the clock, to prevent developers from being able to say that they filed their document while the city was non-compliant. That's the push that a lot of cities had in 2024. That was the position they took. As it turned out in 2025, the state came out with a slew of laws, basically doubling down and establishing no, cities can't self-certify. They have to go through the state, and a substantially compliant housing element is determined by the state and not the city. But what they did do, which was favorable, is they did decrease the unlimited density to 35 units per acre. What they also did was give it more teeth. Now the state can impose civil penalties on cities who don't comply, which didn't exist in the past, and ultimately shifted the burden onto local government. So effectively, this slew of state laws basically doubled down and said, builder's remedy is meant to be a penalty for municipalities that don't turn in their housing element on time. And so San Jose turned theirs in 1 year late. And believe it or not, the county just turned theirs in, and I believe it's 2 years plus late. And so we'll be discussing a number of projects that we are now going to have to endure here in District 10 that effectively, legally speaking, otherwise would not have been able to develop, but are going to be developed now in our district. And I don't mean to alarm you, but there's a bunch of them that are also being built in Morgan Hill. And the way that's going to impact us is the back road down McKean. It's already been a cut through for a lot of folks. And I believe the last time I looked, there were 1,400 units or so being proposed through Builder's Remedy. And there's a number of in the county and within the San Jose sphere of influence that are also going to be built. So the congestion concerns there are real, and the impact in terms of capacity, transportation-wise, are real. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but bad news doesn't age well, and I think it's my job to give it to you straight. We'll be looking at a number of those projects on the next slide, I believe. So in D10 proper, the one that's probably the most egregious in terms of taking what was once commercial land and which is a tax base for us and making it nothing but residential is, if you folks are aware of Santa Teresa and Blossom Hill at that intersection, there's a Scandinavian design shopping center there. I think there's a Bevmo and a Buffalo Wild Wings. Well, that's a builder's remedy project, and in all likelihood, it's going to move forward. And that's going to be 137 townhomes with no commercial uses at all. So if you guys can envision that area with no longer existing, but just homes. There are 2 schools that have effectively been decommissioned. Statewide, this is a problem. There's schools are losing their student population, and schools are having to sell off a portion of their schools. Yeah. So one in particular in Glider, which is back behind Santa Teresa High School. What's that, east of Santa Teresa High School or south of Santa Teresa High School? The proposal, there are 64 single family homes detached. And then Cinnabar is another project, a decommissioned school, just southeast quadrant corner of Blossom Hill and Camden. You guys maybe have passed by it. That is going to be a significant project, 108 townhomes. And so keep in mind, in general, the 2 on the bottom may have had the opportunity to be built. It was going to be an uphill battle. The community would have a lot more input and potentially could prevent or shape it much more into something that's more palatable to them. But now, given the fact these are builders remedy projects, there's no community input. We don't have anything to say. The state law precludes any local laws that we would rest our hat on to shape it. So it's coming, and there's little we can do to stop it. Those are the D10 projects proper. Next slide, please. These are just a sample of the projects that are going to be in our sphere of influence, really close to us in county land. There's some fairly sizable ones. The one that I've given actually a talk on before is the Harry Road project. That's 177 single family detached homes, roughly 2,500 square feet apiece. And for any of you that have traveled down Almaden Expressway to that T to Harry Road, you guys recognize that that's, in terms of just cars and congestion, that's going to be a problem. The problem, though, is in terms of influence that we have as D10 or San Jose residents. Almaden Expressway is county, and so is the Harry Road project. It's all county. So we have very little influence in the entire process, not let alone the fact that it's a builder's remedy project as well. The 2 Almaden Road projects, fairly sizable. The McKean Road is another sizable project. There's a Pierce Ranch project that poses some issues. Unless it can be annexed by the city, the developer is proposing a large septic tank that sits just above the community. That is a concern, obviously, for the folks that are downhill from there. And there are a number of other smaller projects. In fact, I've spoken to Jane at some point about a Greystone project. So I think it's 5 to 7 homes. So these are real issues we're going to have to deal with. And unfortunately, again, given the fact that the state has wrested local control away, we're going to have to figure out a way to endure these projects. Any questions on the builders remedies projects? Oh boy. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Hold on a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I have many questions, but the one important one is why was the city a year late?
Let me go get another. Can you?
Oh,
I'll
yes.
get another one.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm sorry. Okay, why was the city a year late? We really screwed up.
I think when you appreciate also that they had 8 years to turn the housing element in. Now, there'll be some pushback, and I will give some charity to their argument, and it's that the state constantly was changing the goalposts and adding, to which I would argue, in private sector, you can anticipate trends and anticipate what the state was going to do. I think anyone that had been following the trajectory of these types of situations would have anticipated that the state was going to require many more homes. But the answer is the state kept moving the goalpost, which I half can appreciate. But again, if we were in the private sector, just anticipate what the state was going to do and be prepared for it. So I tend to think we dropped the ball. Yes.
So what I'm not sure about on the builder's remedy is, does the governmental agency, city or county, have any ability to put requirements on for upgrade of infrastructure, say sewers or roads, lights, et cetera?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is yes, but to an objective standard. It can't appear to be punitive because it's a builder's remedy project. So if that same requirement would have been given to any other project, and so, yeah. For example, the Harry Road project, they're going to have to do something to mitigate the congestion, right? 177 homes is a sizable influx in cars alone. Problem though is on a state level, we've also, the way we monitor and engage traffic is different now. So now it's VMT, now it's vehicle miles traveled. Whereas before it was just basically now how long am I going to be at an intersection as opposed to if this project wasn't here. So the state has this utopian vision of, I think, basically getting rid of cars. And so for the city of San Jose, for example, when you have a development, the number of cars you need now is virtually nothing. And it's impractical because we live in a sprawl scenario. For example, it's inconceivable that anyone could live in Almaden without a car. We don't have the public transportation infrastructure to support that type of lifestyle. But that is the utopian ideal that planning in San Jose, California as a state is pushing towards, basically eliminating cars or electrifying the ones that are there. So there isn't an appreciation and a requirement for traffic that there used to be. So there will be standards, there will be mitigation measures, there will be things that they'll need to do, but it won't be as stringent as it once was, say, 20, 30 years ago.
Hi, is this something new that the state has this much power over local community? It seems backwards, if you know what I'm saying. The communities and local community government should have the say over what they want in their state. So how long has this been brewing?
Yeah, it is a relatively new phenomenon. Yeah, so probably, yeah, I guess 6 to 10 years it's been happening. So just to give you an example of how fast it's moving too. So the governor just signed, I want to say 60 new housing related bills just this past, I think it was December, September, that January 1st came into play. So just to play devil's advocate, many cities weren't building the housing that the state was asking them to build. And in the past, they were using transportation funds as sort of a carrot and stick. Like if you didn't fulfill it, they would turn the spigot off in terms of the transportation funds they'd give you. That didn't work. And using, stereotypical wealthy cities like, for example, Palo Alto, Los Gatos, Saratoga, they would never build the housing that the state would want them to build. They're wealthy enough to just endure and not take on whatever the funds that were being offered as a bribe, essentially, to build. And so the idea is the local governments aren't doing what we're asking them to do. We have the power as a state. Each city, each municipality, they're called creatures of the state, effectively, in terms of hierarchies, the state controls. So Scott Wiener, there's a couple of folks that have been very prolific in terms of the legislation that they're throwing out. But the idea is the cities aren't doing their jobs. The state can, and since they can, they decided to take that power away and impose a lot of this building onto us. Yeah, but it's a relatively new phenomenon.
In reference to your comments you just made, how good or bad was San Jose in fulfilling the state's requirements or requests on new buildings?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we were failing too. Yeah, we were failing. I'll say why it's, for me, the frustration I have. So HCD is the Housing and Community Development Organization. They're the ones that make the determination. But right now, it's like a black box and they just spit out some numbers that you're supposed to build. They've never actually defined or told us what the methodology is that they use to determine how many homes each municipality is supposed to build. So there's some issue there. But no, San Jose was behind as well, woefully behind. In fact, we are way behind now. I think to hit our 62,000 homes, we're supposed to be roughly 5,000 a year. And I don't think we did anywhere even near 1,000 this year. So we're way behind. Nah, no.
Do we have something on the Zoom? Okay, while you're doing that, I think you had your hand up.
Question, how do the sites were identified as the sites to build these houses? And just to follow up in her question, were there any resources evaluated, meaning sewers, schools, grocery stores, freeways, roads, all of those things? And is there going to be any budget that is going to come into that to build that and to make it better for these new houses?
So you're saying when the developers,
How do the sites were allocated? How do those sites were identified?
yeah,
What was looked into it as resources for that?
yeah.
And now that they're going to be built,
Yeah.
is there any money coming in to reinforce those resources?
So I'll give you an example. Harry Road, people have been trying to develop that for years. And the city and the county, Washington County has always said no because of the reasons you're asking, right? Is the infrastructure, can it sustain that type of development? It's always been no. That's what makes builders remedy so different. If you haven't turned in your housing element, all those laws, all those guidelines that were put in place, those zoning and local controls that were put in place to prevent effectively bad developments or developments that don't fit, no longer apply. So the developer themselves, took advantage of it and they saw an opportunity. So these aren't areas where traditionally were developable at all. But folks have had these properties for a long time and have tried over the years. And once this builder's remedy option came in, all they had to do was apply. So the rules that were once in place just don't apply to these projects. So there's no guardrails to prevent them. There'll be money coming in naturally for anytime you do a development, there's going to be park fees and there will have to be some mitigation in terms of traffic and things that they'll need to do. Yeah, they'll come in based on that's what makes so many of our projects in San Jose and in California so expensive. There are all these fees attached to a project that the developer will need to put into a fund to address a lot of the issues that you're discussing. All that, yeah.
Okay, I think two from Zoom.
We have two questions from Zoom. First is, how can community members advocate with the county supervisors regarding concerns about these projects, especially those along Almaden Expressway?
The only one that I think you may have a chance working with your supervisor to limit is the Harry Road project. Oh, who is that ugly guy? My head's that shiny from behind. So there's a water treatment piece to the Harry Road project that adds another layer of complexity to that project that I think if the community were so inclined to pursue and figure out a way for that to sort of gum up the project, that's a unique feature to that project. The other ones, again, trying to manage expectations, these developers have state law behind them. That momentum is very difficult to overcome. So effectively, unless they abandon these projects or whatever infrastructure they need to put into place becomes cost prohibitive for them. But there's nothing you can do for a builder's remedy project that was filed appropriately. All the law and everything is on the developer side as far as these are concerned. So I wish I had a better answer, but that's the reality.
Second question from Zoom is, what are the plans to right-size the PG&E water and sewer services with these expanded high-density housing, also fire services?
We'll talk about fire service in the last section. So PG&E is a privately run company outside of our purview. To the extent we have leverage with them, we can negotiate with them, but we generally don't have much leverage. And I can tell you PG&E for developers and for the city has been a big problem. Oftentimes developments stall because we have to wait for PG&E to come out and do their piece. So it's very difficult for us to tell a private company what to do and how to do it. So again, another one where I wish I had a good answer, but there's not much we can do with PG&E. That's the answer, sorry. In terms of fire, no, those are county projects. So it's a different fire department.
And water and sewer?
Water and sewer are different, but typically what happens with these types of projects that are built in county, the city ultimately ends up annexing them. And if that is done prior to really the horizontal development being done, then they would tap into city sewer and city services. I don't know that the city, given these are builders remedy projects and where a lot of them are located, will have the appetite to do that. But traditionally speaking, these county projects were annexed into the city and into the city sewer system and infrastructure.
I thank you. I'd just like to say, George, first time I seen you at AVCA, and your explanation so far is much better than our previous representation on city council. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to say a couple of things though, and you can comment on them, not exactly questions. First of all, anything along McKean Road, Harry Road in the county was part of the South Almaden Urban Reserve, set up in the 1980s under Tom McHenry, and the AVCA was very instrumental in getting that done at the time. It's supposed to be reserved as green space forever, was the understanding. So maybe again, you can explain how come this is not being honored anymore, even though this was supposed to be done and was done with the county and state's blessing back in the 1980s. And the second thing is, I know you talk about the state, but let's keep in mind, the state is the current governor, and it's the people who represent us in the legislature. So if you don't like the things that are being done in the so-called builder's remedy and the things that Scott Wiener of San Francisco put through for the whole state to look like San Francisco, remember that when you go to the ballot box, you keep electing the same people and the same governor and the same legislators, and they're the ones that are doing this stuff. So now I'll let you comment. Thank you.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's hard to argue with that. Yeah, so elections have consequences ultimately, right? So this trend is continuing, right? And these folks are doubling down. I mean, it's a proliferation of these types of legislation yearly. So 2 years ago, there's probably half the number of bills that came that were housing related. And every year it's getting worse and worse. So to your point, please pay attention to who you vote for. We're gonna get more and more of this unless there's a way and cities start trying to fight back. But again, legally speaking, we don't have much of a leg to stand on, but through the ballot box, I think is the leverage that we need to exercise. So great point. Rich and Fred.
Okay, so we screwed up. We didn't get our paperwork in until a year late. Is there any way to get that authority back that we would have had we put it in on time?
Retroactively, no. So again, builder's remedy is meant to be a punishment for turning it in late. And so they're not going to let the municipalities off the hook. It's meant to be punitive. And in fact, a number of the bills that came out were explicitly stated, you know, retroactively, you can't go back and change things up. So unfortunately, the answer to that is no.
Yeah, I am. Councilman. So my question is, what I didn't know is Almaden Expressway was county. I'm not sure why they'd want to hang on to that albatross. Why isn't there not any type of easement being developed, if that's the correct terminology, that the city could take control of it or at least make use of it as any easement would be? Right. I'm getting into your real estate talk here, but I think it makes sense, but is that anything possible?
Well, I think, you know, folks don't want to give up power and land. And there's also an incentive for San Jose not to want to take over, because we'd be responsible financially for keeping it paved and taking care of it. And there is a economic factor to that. It is within our sphere of influence, and you would think we would be the ones responsible for it. And I'll tell you, there's another way where it comes into play. So we're allowed to now, through all kinds of machinations, put speed cameras up. But we can't put them up on Almaden Expressway because that's county land. So there's a number of reasons and ways why that complicates us, and this interjurisdictional hodgepodge. I mean, Capital Expressway is also county. So given also that we're going into a budget deficit, I don't know that the city is clamoring to take over all of that responsibility just for the upkeep cost alone. But it's food for thought. It's something we should consider. Right. Yeah. I think the county may be okay with it. I don't know what the incentive is for the county to be in charge of it, why they wouldn't want to let go, but I can definitely tell you the city doesn't want to foot the bill. Yeah. Good question, though.
For the mic.
As a former member of the County Transportation Commission, which preceded VTA, and the County Roads Commission, which still exists, the county would be reluctant to revert control of the expressways. And by the way, it's all 9 expressways in the county. Anything that ends expressways, like the Capital Expressway, Lawrence Expressway, all those are county facilities. The county is generally reluctant to let cities take control because they would assume that once the cities had control, they would no longer keep them operating like expressways. They want to put a lot of stoplights, et cetera. And the whole purpose of this expressway system, which was created by the county in the 1960s, was the Santa Clara County was not getting highway money to build good highways as other counties were. So we created an expressway system, the only county in the state that has this, in order to provide fast access on the county expressways between different cities in the county. So reverting control to the cities would basically end that concept.
That's a great point.
So
Have we beat Builder's Remedy up, or do we have another one? Oh, and another one behind you as well. And Jane is
now,
okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
okay, it's on. Okay, we talked a few minutes ago about the done deal.
Right.
And it's early. That the city didn't anticipate, and you said if you were in the private sector, you would have anticipated this consequence. So I believe what I'm hearing is that transportation, a glut of cars, is going to be a problem, and it's going to happen. So what is San Jose planning to help deal with the upcoming traffic issue before the houses are built? Let's start planning that.
Well, I just got a lot of bad news for you guys. I wish I had a good answer. I don't think, in terms of priorities, that's on the list right now. I don't think they're planning anything. And legally, given what the state has done in terms of how we view traffic and parking, the city's hands are also tied because a lot of those bare minimums that we used to have been removed. So there isn't the same requirement for parking and that there was in the past.
So I'm going to say we eliminated some of the transportation we had in Almaden. So let's take a second look. I mean, really.
I think, it's a good point. In the past, for example, the light rail system that we had, it wasn't laid down for transportation purposes. It was laid down for political purposes. So they weren't really efficiently laid out. I don't know how you guys feel, and it'd be nice to get the community's input, but the median in Almaden Expressway, if that were some sort of system that could take people back and forth. We just had a presentation, all right, my office did, by a company that has, and I don't know how comfortable any of you would be, but this cars where no one's driving it. And so a lot of new technology is coming out that may be able to help out, that we could rely on more. But you're right, in Almaden, as I mentioned earlier on, it's inconceivable that you can live in Almaden without a car. And we're also going to have problems with, for example, the ADUs. The proliferation of ADUs in these neighborhoods is only going to bring more cars. And the quality of life it's different. If you look at a multifamily neighborhood or neighborhoods with your duplexes and you just drive through, you'll see it's a ton of cars all the way around, or apartment complexes, ton of cars. single family neighborhoods where there's going to be a number of duplexes and ADUs, it's going to be very similar. We do, and there's no solution over the horizon, unfortunately. Oh, we have to work on it. Well, as a city, we can't impose a lot of the rules that would prevent that many cars being on the road. It just, we're handcuffed. It's almost like with the police officers in the past, right? When Prop 47 was out, where folks that could steal all the way up to $950 basically. I mean, that's a state level law. And unless we do, like the gentleman mentioned, unless we elect folks that share our same values when it comes to growth and transportation, there is, again, a utopian ideal that a lot of planners and city folks are looking at. And that ideal is, less cars or electric cars. And it just doesn't, the practical reality is we live in an urban sprawl area and we need cars. So I wish I had a good answer for you. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, a couple of questions. The first, I heard you say that there wasn't much hope of any legal issues being resolved. However, given you said that the bar of standards had changed, yet the timing of the reporting didn't seem to be changing, it seems that would give an opportunity for a group of cities to get together and have some kind of legal repercussions. The other question was.
Wait, hold on, let me see if I understand the first one. Are you talking with regard to builder's remedy?
Builder's
projects?
remedy,
Yeah,
yes.
I don't think I understand it. So you were saying bar.
You said that the requirements had changed. They said, hey, you have to have so many houses built, or I don't know what about
No,
the
there's no
requirements that changed.
That's what the builder's remedy does.
So
There's no requirements.
if there's no understanding of what the state was requiring cities to report on or to handle.
Oh, you're talking about in terms of the number of homes
yeah.
that they were supposed to bring
Yeah,
in?
yeah.
So the question is.
So the question is, how come there isn't a group of cities saying, hey, you didn't give us any clear indication of what exactly you were asking for? The other thing is, I think I heard you say there were a couple of school properties that were being used for builder's remedy.
Right.
So my question is there any opportunity to receive one of those districts, Cinnabar, or one of the schools, Cinnabar is a leasing property for Union School District, so they get a fair amount of money, leasing monies from that. Is that going to be compensated? And two, if you're going to have all these places being built, children are going to be there. Is there any vision to see if there are enough schools to be able to handle the influx of new children?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the school district is the one that sold the property to the developer. So they'll get the lump sum money that they sold the property for, but they won't get, it won't be a lease. It's not like a ground lease to the developer. They're selling that property.
Yeah.
I think you hit on a pretty good point, right? These schools are selling off their properties because there's not a lot of students. The student population is dwindling, and then they're building homes at a rapid pace who are conceivably, there'll be more kids and the capacity for the schools are there will be impacted.
And there's no land.
I think the assessment is that regardless of whether those new houses come online and new kids come online, we're losing kids at such a clip that it really won't make an impact. And so this is something actually that's going to happen throughout the state, and in particular in San Jose as well. There's going to be a number of these schools that shut down throughout the city because of the dwindling student population. So this phenomenon is something that we're going to be stuck with for the conceivable near future.
Thank you.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
It passed, some of these developers' fees did not have to then be spent locally. For example, park fees for developments put into the Almaden area could then be transferred downtown for parks to be built downtown. Has that changed?
Yeah, that's not the case anymore. In fact, I was talking to the parks folks today about D10 in particular, the backlog in terms of maintenance and whatnot. No, the development fee goes to the district where the project is, and it's actually more circumscribed. It's within a radius of the development itself where it needs to be spent. If it's for a community use, it has to be within 3 miles of the development. And if it's not a community use, within 3/4 of a mile around it. So yeah, all of those park fees and those in lieu fees go into the district.
Mike?
I believe so, yeah. It's all within the district. Transportation, hold on. I'll need to check on the transportation. On that one, I'm not quite as sure, but I'm certain about the park fees. Yeah, and that's one of the problems with District 10. We don't have as much development as some of the other districts do. And so the kitty is bare for us. Yeah, good question.
Okay, over here.
I think Sandra and Ms. Landis had one too.
Hi. You said the builder's remedy was punitive, and I'm trying to think of who is it punitive to besides the neighborhood?
Right. It's meant to be punitive against the city, right?
How is it punitive against the city?
Because they can't, local control has been taken, their control, their authority to designate what goes where is gone. It's eliminated. And we do get the tax revenue, and it's in a weird way, it actually helps the cities because it gives them cover. So when the community gets upset, they can say, hey, no, it's the state's fault, right? And they're reaching closer and closer to achieving their housing goals, right? So each one of these homes that come online is another step closer to the 62,000 that they need to build. So
Microphone.
what she's saying, what's the incentive for cities to ever get their housing element in on time? And I think it's us, the backlash that we unleash, electing folks that, for example, and I don't know if it's because of my background, but had I been on the council moving up, this would have been something I would have been, banging the drum on. We need to get our housing element in. We need to get our housing element in. So I hate to go back to the gentleman's maxim, but elections, have consequences. And so if we have folks that are conscious of this, and again, this isn't going to come around again for another 8 years, but rest assured, we're going to be dealing with this again in 8 years. And unless we are prepared for it and get our housing element in quicker, we're going to be dealing with it again. Yeah, every 8 years, the city or municipality has to turn in their housing element. Every 8 years. Sandra?
Okay, we have one more question, then we'll move on.
George, I'd like you to check on that on the 8 years. And the reason I'm saying that is it's my understanding, which is not always correct, that if the city has not met its housing goal in 4 years, halfway through the 8-year period, that builder's remedy comes back.
Oh, I hadn't heard of that.
So please check on
I'll
that.
check on it.
I heard that from Anita.
Okay.
So I think we need to check on that because there's no way we're getting there.
Well, I was going to
And
say, so
it-
it's kind of a moot point, right? Because I don't think we're going to get anywhere
Yep,
near.
but I think we need to start informing the public
Right.
so that we can start writing to
Yeah.
Cortez and others.
Well, you do know, right? We are the one state where we can get a referendum or something on the ballot if we get enough signatures. So there are avenues for us as a populace to speak out and make our voices heard. I think if enough people get upset, for example, with the Prop 19 piece, I mean, there's things that we should be doing and could be doing. The problem is getting everybody rowing in the same direction is a challenge. But I will look into that, Sandra. Thank you. So we flogged builder's remedy to death here. Okay.
Hold on, George. We have
Yes.
to
Oh, sorry.
do a mic change.
Microphone.
Oh, no. It's an 8-year cycle that stays. It has nothing to do with when the date is turned in. It's every 8 years. We've got 7 years. Oh, right.
Actually got turned in.
No, it's 8 years.
From the
Yeah,
date
the
it
8
was-
years doesn't change regardless of when
Yeah.
you turn it in. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Right, right. And we should have had, by the numbers, 31,000 units built in order to be on pace. And as I mentioned, I don't think we built 1,000 in this past year. So we were supposed to build roughly 5,000 a year just to stay on pace. Or even more than that. No, it's 6,000, 5 or 6,000 a year. And we're not going to hit it. That's particularly with the economic climate we're in and the development climate we're in. The cost of materials, construction materials, and the cost of labor and the interest rates where they are, nobody's building. You could actually buy a building that it cost $100 million to build now for 60, 40, $50 million in different parts of the country and in the Bay Area. So there is no incentive at the moment to build, unfortunately. So we are in a lull in terms of the building cycle. Good on builder's remedy? One more? Oh. Sure.
I'm curious, where does VTA fit within all of this? Let me explain this a little, right? Almaden used to have a train stop, a light rail, right, stop Almaden, and then it went to Oak Ridge, and then it went to Chamber, right? And housing built up around it, or apartments did.
Yeah.
And then VTA shut down that corridor, added bus service, but it's a total different situation than when it was light rail.
Right.
So where does the VTA fit within all of these new units going in and the degree to which they can create a scenario under which you don't have to have as many cars on the road?
So I believe the reason why the light rail and the buses stopped coming with the frequency that they once did was the ridership. The ridership wasn't there to support, financially to support. And we had a bunch. I mean, I used to catch the 64 to go to high school all the way downtown right here. And I don't think that even comes out here anymore. So it was a function of economics. They didn't have the ridership to support the routes, and they cut them down. Well, they got rid of the routes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, I wish, again, another one where I wish there was a good answer. The VTA is having all sorts of issues in terms of the way it's run. I'd say PG&E, people hate PG&E a lot more than the VTA, but I say VTA is up there on the list of folks that are not very well liked. So we're going to go to the next, Rich, next topic. Yeah, so next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we are just entering into the mid-year budget cycle, and the projections are that we are going to be in a deficit. For the most part, everything else is in line with the expectations. Property taxes are number one revenue generator for our general fund. Our number two revenue generator is sales tax, and that's the one that's down. And so right now, they're forecasting $25 to $30 million deficit. I've heard actually all the way up to potentially $60 million will be our deficit. We have a meeting tomorrow with the budget folks, and we have a study session where they'll be discussing recommendations in terms of how we can kind of overcome or shorten, squeeze that gap in, and what we can do in terms of cuts. Happy to come back and report on that conversation, but this was just we're early in this discussion, but it's anticipated that we're $30 to $60 million short of where we need to be in terms of our general fund. And so there's going to be cuts potentially to some vital services. Everyone's going to have to sort of tighten their belt strings a bit. But again, we haven't really formally started that discussion. And when we get more deeply into it, I'll come back and give you guys some information. In fact, I think it was Matt's coming in 2 weeks or 2 months. Oh yeah, I'll come back before then with some updates. Next slide. Okay, this is a big one. I don't know that you guys, I do and don't at times. I keep forgetting. San Jose is a really big city, square mile wise. And we have a wonderful fire department. They're understaffed. But I venture to say, even if they were fully staffed, this is a hard area to really, really manage. So we're 208 square miles is what our San Jose Fire Department is responsible for. 181 of those square miles are within the city limits. 27, I believe, or so of those are these areas in the county that are adjacent to San Jose. At any given time, we've got 190 firefighters that are out daily. But that number there, it shocked me. For the fiscal year of 2023, 2024, the fire department answered 110,000 calls for service. And such a small fraction, I'm trying to get this information, but there's a small percentage of those were actually for fires. Yeah. And so I did a ride along a couple of years ago with a buddy of mine, police officer, and it shocked me that every call we went to, the police were basically doing traffic control, but it was the firefighters that were showing up and administering first aid or dealing with whatever situation that was at hand. So there's a tremendous strain right now on our fire department. I don't say that to scare you guys, but just the sheer size of our city, it's daunting Fortunately, through Measure T, we had the funding for 3 more fire departments. One was just recently built over off of Lincoln and Kirtner, just north of Kirtner. 2 more are coming online, one near the 680-101 interchange. That'll come online in 2026, and another one at the 101 and Capitol intersection. And so these will increase availability. So the area that was a big concern down in Southern California where their fires happen is similar to where we live right now. And they're designated as wildland urban interfaces. So it's where, for example, Quicksilver and basically the foothills that envelop us and wrap around us, those are all considered wildland urban interfaces. Next slide, please. So this is a map basically showing all of District 10. The yellow is So we're basically surrounded by moderate to high to very high areas that conceivably could cause some concerns for us as far as fires are concerned. What's important to note is that much of the orange is county here on the southern part of it. That foothill there, that's actually county as well. Next slide, please. So what's important to know is that the San Jose Fire Department isn't alone in terms of dealing with potential fire hazards. We have an annual operating agreement. It's a fire protection plan with the state, CAL FIRE, where we have mutual threat zones. So CAL FIRE will respond without us having to ask them in mutual threat zones. And those are generally, it's called automatic aid response. And this was a bit reassuring for me, knowing that the strain wasn't going to just be on our 190 firefighters, that the cavalry will come in. And I don't know if you guys followed what happened down in Los Angeles. We had a number of guys and gals that went out there and risked their lives, and they came from a number of different fire departments. This wasn't just Southern California fighters. Folks from San Jose, firefighters from San Jose also went down to help out. So having these mutual threat plans and zones where groups will come together, it was reassuring for me. But next slide, as reassuring as that was for me, we're still going to be on our own the way this is laid out, the way San Jose is laid out, and the way Almaden, for example, is positioned in proximity to the fire stations in the city. So I'm of the firm belief that we need to do our part as well, and that's individually, each home, each neighborhood association, and the entire district needs to supplement what we expect the firefighters to do and what the city must do. Next slide. Oh, so there's some money that's coming down the pike where we're going to do some presentations, and the city's going to do some advertising and digital advertising. But this is really important to me. Every home in District 10 should be part of a neighborhood association. And every neighborhood association should have a evacuation and preparedness plan. And they should get training in order to figure out what the plan is. I mean, these are basic things. So we had a presentation this past Saturday at the Vineland Library. Lee Steckmis, as some of you may know him, puts on a very practical presentation, giving you some really good information in terms of what you should be doing individually and as a family to prepare yourself in the eventuality that there's any type of natural disaster, whether it's an earthquake or a fire. It's a real basic common sense stuff. Like, for example, your car should never be less than a half a tank of gas. God forbid you have to jump out into your car and get out of town. And if there's an earthquake and electricity is out, you're not going to be able to stop and get gas. And he also showed me a map, and it dawned on me. He said there's roughly 5 to 7 million people here in the Bay Area and very limited exit routes in terms of freeways. So you want to have an exit strategy where you can beat the crowd and get out. You don't want to be fumbling, stumbling, while everybody's clogging the arteries. In terms of water and food, what you could do for, swimming pools being an option for water, and just devices that are very cheap that can filter water for you. So just basic survival stuff and preparedness tactics that I think are invaluable to all of us. And I think we should all experience his presentation. So there'll be 2 more of them, one February 20th at the Almaden Community Center, and one February 26th at the Santa Teresa Community Center. So again, I was surprised. So I grew up here, and part of the orientation for new council members is they introduce you to each department. You meet the department heads, and they tell you what they're responsible for. I'm at the Office of Emergency Management. I didn't even know we had an Office of Emergency Management. And the number of resources that are available to us that I was unaware of. So my goal is, through creating these neighborhood associations, is to build this information infrastructure where boots on the ground, folks know what's going on, and they can get it up to me just for political reasons, and vice versa. I can get information to the neighborhood leaders and they can get it out to the community. But more so for this emergency preparedness, you got to know who's in your neighborhood that probably can't get up and walk. We need to be able to check on our neighbors. We need to be able to rely on each other. But as a community, we can prepare ourselves and be supplemental to what the fire department is supposed to do. And in many, because God forbid if something were to go down and folks passed away that didn't have to, just because they didn't do some of the basic things that are available to us. So I encourage all of you, if you don't live in a neighborhood association or if your home's not part of one, to reach out to my office. We're forming 10 new ones here within the next month or so. And the goal is, as I mentioned, to have one in every neighborhood and to identify places where you can go. We're going to find schools where we're going to store food and equipment and things to get us through 3, 6, 7 days, God forbid, if the power goes out. So I really want to double down as far as being your council member on this type of action. And I implore all of you to get involved and to reach out to your neighbors. And like I said, if you're not part of a neighborhood association or one doesn't exist in your neighborhood, please reach out to our office. We're forming them as quickly as we can. And we're bringing out folks to do presentations to help you guys out. Sam? Yes.
Okay, first a statement, then a question.
Uh-oh.
And it's not about Prop 19. The Harry Road.
Yeah.
So this will lead into my question. 177 homes. I happen to live up in the county lands. There are, in my case, 2 ways in and out.
Right.
As a youngster, I had to evacuate with a horse. Okay.
Wow.
I have a big problem, not with the building. I'm not a NIMBY. I'm not a YIMBY. I'm for responsible planning.
Right.
So 177 homes with a potential cemetery down on McKean. The people who live up in the Greystone area are kind of SOL.
Right.
So you don't need to answer this today.
Yeah.
I want to know what specific steps you and Supervisor Kobe can do to get infrastructure before shovels start. Because you have several hundred people who will be burnt, okay? Yeah. And their pets. So you don't need to answer.
Well, let me touch on that
Okay.
briefly. So obviously this is county land and we don't have much influence on it, but I hear what you're saying, and there's actually a bit more of a concern there. So even if this development weren't happening, the county hasn't been taking what they call it fuel. There's a lot of cleanup that needs to be done throughout the Quicksilver area and a lot of the county land that they're not doing. And it's basically a tinderbox waiting to set on fire. So
but we have to work together. I mean, it's really frustrating.
Yeah.
And I will say the same thing very direct to Supervisor Kobe, excuse me, that we have to work together because we can't say, oh, it's the county, it's the city. So let me go into the question about fire. I am, and where I live, crazy about fire. We have spent thousands of dollars. This is one home. Thousands. I've had a fireman friend who's actually down in the Palisades fire come in, tell me if the land is okay. What specific steps, because fire does not know county versus city. Fire just goes. What specific steps can you come, you don't have to answer today, come back, partner with Supervisor Kobe. What can the city, county, and individual homeowners do? It'll be a hell of a lot less expensive and emotional now. I mean, I see trees and shrubs everywhere, and it's not PG&E, it's not the city. What can you do?
Yeah. So obviously working together, and as it applies to the fuel and the shrubs and the cleanups that we need to do, I think city and county can work together and find the resources to do that. But when it comes to infrastructure, we just legally don't have any input on that. That's on the county to decide how they're going to respond to those developments. But in terms of concern with them not taking care of the fuel, so to speak, all that brush and material, natural material that could potentially burn our residents, I think we have an obligation to continue and establish a dialogue and use whatever leverage we can to have them clean those areas out. But I'll be candid with you, when it comes to the infrastructure, there's nothing we can do as a city to impose, and vice versa. There's nothing the county can do to tell us how to build something or what we can do with our infrastructure. So I know that's not the answer you wanted, but there's also 9 other council members and the mayor. So we'd have to convince all of them to do something. And even if we all agreed on it, legally, we still can't do anything. So I apologize for the answer, but that's the harsh reality. We have one here in the front, and Sandra.
Yeah, just about the 110,000 calls that firemen made, most of which were not fires.
Right.
Have we looked at using EMT,
Oh, that's
which are less paid for?
Oh, yeah, that's
a
a
lot
good
of that?
question. It's a very good point. So we have firefighters that are EMTs and folks that are on, that's part of our response team. So when fire responds, the EMTs, that's all kit and caboodle that goes out to all of our calls. There are EMTs in our, right. This isn't probably the venue to discuss it, but there is a whole issue that I'm personally trying to dig into between the county and us as far as EMTs and resources. But it's a big problem. We can't even hire enough EMTs and firefighters at the moment. So I think we're 38. We have the budget for 38 firefighters, but we haven't found 38 firefighters that want to come work for us. There's 60 total positions within the fire department that are vacant, that are already budgeted, that we just can't fill. EMTs is the most difficult one to fill. The education and then the opportunities elsewhere for more money makes it difficult for us and lower cost of living. Exactly. Right.
But it's frustrating as a homeowner to see the fire truck go by with some regularity, because I'm only a few blocks from the fire station, and know that 99% of those calls are 911 calls for the an ambulance and the EMT. And yet you're using all this fire department, fire personnel in order to meet that call.
Right.
It's like, why were the two joined together? And does it make sense to continue that in the long run? Or does it keep the firemen engaged in doing something since there are so few fires?
So I guess the alternative would be for firefighters, this is devil's advocate, since there are so few actual fires, to basically sit around and not do anything, right? And we do pay them, and they are a resource. And I can tell you, several times in my life, I've encountered and had to call and deal with them, and they're wonderful. And they come out, but I don't know that you could actually bifurcate or separate the EMT role out of the firefighter role, because every call they go on, if it was a fire, ultimately is going to need an EMT.
But if it's an EMT call, is it necessary to have that fire truck?
That's a good
It's
question.
got to be more expensive than
Yeah.
just some kind of an ambulance type vehicle.
Well, I'll tell you, my daughter goes to Valley Christian, and I went to go pick her up, and on the way home, we're coming down Snell, and there was a car parked on the opposite side of the street facing ongoing traffic, and there was a lady who had gone through, I don't know if she had a stroke or what, but she just was positioned right in the middle of the street. I got out, called 911, and who did they send? Fireman. The fireman came, and it obviously wasn't a fire. So yeah, I hear you. But the alternative, effectively is to have this infrastructure and these individuals that are well-trained, and for them just to sit dormant inside the firehouse, not doing anything. So I wish we had more police officers to answer calls and more EMTs. We're actually 400 to 500 police officers short of where we need to be just to be serviceable. So between fire and police, we're undermanned or underwomaned, however you want.
So George, we will be having the fire chief here next month.
Okay.
So a lot of these questions should come up again. If you're interested, please come back.
Yes.
We have a question on Zoom.
Okay.
Mike, is the mic up? So question from Zoom is regarding the new community associations. Folks who live in communities with HOAs, will it be those HOAs who will work on these emergency type plans? Or if there's something broader as far as organizing the plans that's broader than the HOAs? And if it's the HOAs and they are not responsive, what kind of oversight can the city have in the aims of these new community associations?
Well, I would think we would start with the HOAs because the infrastructure and everything's already built in place. So, but if the HOA is non-responsive and doesn't want to be involved, that doesn't mean we can't start another neighborhood association. So the individuals living within the HOA can be involved, and the greater community. So these homeowner associations, some of them will be fairly sizable. So the homeowners association can pretty much subsume whatever that development is and be an umbrella organization over theirs. So if they're not responsive and they don't want to be involved, we can form another neighborhood association surrounding them as well. Sandra.
Thank you, George. The city manager came out with a memo that described the state of firefighting in the city of San Jose.
Right.
It was very focused on the city of San Jose. I would like to see, though you say it's very difficult, I would like to see the county, water, San Jose water, everybody get together and talk about what do we need? Because we have dams that are down here. Sounds pretty familiar to what happened in LA.
Anderson is down.
And some other ones
Right.
are low.
Yeah.
We need like this other lady said, a holistic approach.
Right.
On top of what reading from what this city manager wrote, I wasn't comfortable. We've done some work in Alamarock, but we haven't done any work in the county, like you've said.
Right.
Also, I found it interesting that the goals for the fire department in terms of response time do not even meet the standards set by whatever the National Fire Association sets.
Right.
So, and then on top of that, I couldn't find on the website their goal, I found, but I couldn't find their performance.
Yeah.
And when I'm talking about goals, I'm talking about response time. 6 minutes here, 4 minutes there, 2 minutes here. So I think we need a little more visibility. And to speak as an individual, I don't think we should be making any cuts in the police or fire department at all. And yet what I think I saw was a proposal to do some cuts in those departments or to not fill the open positions. I'm not sure if I got that right.
Right. So to Gary's point earlier, Chief Sapien will be here and he could speak more directly to that. I'm not for any cuts to police or fire. One of the reasons, the whole reason I ran primarily was public safety. I mean, we're already way below where we need to be serviceable. We have 120 plus open positions right now in the police department. Unfortunately, can't fill those. So I don't know what type of accounting magic they're going to work, but I would not support any cuts to police and fire. But I'll let Chief Sapien speak to specifics. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I want to say I love that the city is offering the CERT program. I think that was a wise investment on their part. I'm signed up for the end of the month. We were
Nice.
supposed to be doing it last year and something fell through. So I'm glad that the end of this month that's going to happen and I'm going to be more actively involved. Years ago, I served as a disaster action team member for the American Red Cross. I'm wondering what's going on citywide beyond CERT that they are doing as a city to do a major disaster drill. I remember when I was doing this 20, oh my gosh, probably 30 years ago.
Yeah.
We did have a practice drill at SJC for a major aircraft disaster. I haven't heard one happening since. Maybe they have, but I haven't heard about it. And I know around the time, and I was down south for the 94 earthquake at the time, and LA was doing a citywide, getting all the hotels involved, all the businesses involved, and everybody did a one-day disaster preparedness. And I have never seen one that happened here, not even since '89.
Right.
What are we doing to address that?
So I can't speak for citywide, but I can tell you my goal is, as I mentioned earlier on, for us to do that here in D10 to be prepared for that. And that's why the neighborhood associations will be integral in doing that. And I also, as I mentioned, want to identify places, schools where we can store supplies that we may need and identify, there's a program called Hubs that we're going to try to roll out too, where you'll know if something goes wrong, where to meet. And everyone in your community, and it'll be one in close proximity to each neighborhood association or each little group. And so we need, I think it's incumbent upon us. I hate to say this. The thing I've noticed is that internally, as far as the city goes, incremental change is probably the best you can hope for. But I'd like to use this office here in the community to do things that we can do. And I'll tell you, our community is special. We have the most social capital. We have the most engaged people. We can take care of a lot of that on our own. And we should have these types of events, you know, every 6 months, every year, where everyone in D10 knows what to do in the event of an earthquake or some sort of, God forbid, event. So my goal is to roll that type of thing out and take it upon the district. We can't wait for the city, and you can't hope that the city is going to, I hate to say it, solve our problems or do anything for us. So I think it's incumbent upon us to handle that. Yeah.
Hey, George, I got a question and wanted to change the subject just a little bit.
Sure.
I understand that we are looking at reestablishing the welcome city standards for the city of San Jose. And I read that Matt is in favor of working with ICE to remove violent criminals from San Jose. The district attorney, the current district attorney, and past district attorneys have all favored that standard for sanctuary citydom and countydom. What do you think is likely to come out?
When you say likely to come out, you mean?
My understanding was you're looking at it again as a council.
Well, it did come before the last council meeting.
Oh, I missed it.
Yeah, we reaffirmed our position along those lines. But I can just tell you personally, I think we're a nation of immigrants, but we're also a nation of laws. And those two things shouldn't be mutually exclusive. And whether you consider unfortunate or not, immigration or some of these issues, that's a federal concern, and it's beyond our purview. And I think Matt's take on it is we're not going to get in the way if they're coming to arrest violent criminals. But we did reaffirm our position at the last council meeting.
Question.
Say again, Sandra? Sorry. So to the effect that we still won't ask anyone their immigration status. We're not a sanctuary city per se, but this is a sanctuary county. And despite the fact that we won't ask anybody their immigration status, we also won't intervene or interrupt or in any way prevent the federal government from coming in and arresting the criminals, the violent criminals, or the folks they're trying to arrest.
I'm sorry. I'm going to come back to the fire and police thing.
Sure.
I know there might be tremendous union problems with this, but I believe the city of Sunnyvale has one service, which is both police and fire. And unless they've changed it, then they might have changed in the last few years, but this has been true for like last 50 years or so. So you call emergency service in Sunnyvale, and the person who comes out can do police work and fire. And they do have fire trucks and they do have police cars, but the same personnel can do either job.
Yeah. Yeah. Sunnyvale compared to San Jose for a number of reasons, you know, it's not an apples to apples comparison, right? Just in terms of the geography, right? The landmass, the square miles that we need to cover. And Sunnyvale is much wealthier than we are. Sunnyvale has a number of companies that are there that are contributing to their general fund and their tax base. So I would imagine even on a per capita basis, whether these firefighters / police officers, I'm sure they are overstaffed or staffed at levels that we would appreciate. But it's an interesting thought, and you're right. I don't know that the unions, their heads would probably explode if you were even to propose something like that. Yeah, it's an interesting point, though. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I apologize. This question is kind of off topic
No,
for
no
this
problem.
evening, but I've noticed recently in the last year or so quite a large expansion of bicycle lanes being constructed in the area. And what concerns me about it is not that we have safe places for bicyclists to bicycle, but our infrastructure, our roadways are very expensive assets. And in many cases, it appears that we're taking up a third of the road surface for bicyclists, and I never see anyone using the bike lanes.
These people are echoing your same sentiment.
And so I'm wondering where where is the drive to have more bicycle lanes coming from? Is this a federal? Is this a state? Or is this a city?
Well, it's interesting. So you have bicyclists that are very loud, well organized, and this is obviously very important to them. We had a mayor too that was behind this, and it was an important item for him as well. I can tell you, I spoke with a number of folks. So I knocked on 20,000 doors during the campaign, so I heard all sorts of issues, and this one in particular didn't tickle me, but it was unfortunate. So here, if you go down Camden, at the intersection of Camden and Almaden Expressway, the folks that live right there on the corner, that bike lane effectively took any parking that they had in front of their house, and it's gone. And no one asked them anything, right? It's just one weekend they came out and just changed everything. They've also mentioned that in the year and a half or so, they've probably seen 2 people riding their bikes through the lane. And so I share their frustration. You know, it'd be nice to have a win-win where we did have an opportunity for bicyclists to enjoy the streets, but I also question how practical it is. And the other issue is, even recently, I don't know if you guys have noticed the white, they're not cones, but the little pylons that they've put throughout the city. They cut the lanes, but they've created a scenario where even the street sweepers can't get in there and clean the bike lanes. So even bicyclists are frustrated and upset because now they can't even use the lanes that have been designated for their use. And along Hamilton, they have a bunch of these, I don't know if the pylons are up, and even the fire departments are frustrated with it because they can't turn around and maneuver and get through them. So again, I don't know what the transportation department is thinking, what study they're referencing, or what new ideology they've adopted, but in practical terms, it doesn't work.
So is the decision to improve or enlarge bicycle lanes in San Jose? Is that who's determining where and when to build these lanes?
I don't know if it's necessarily, I think ultimately they're involved in the process. I don't know who the actual driver, I would have to check into that. I don't know who the department that's the real driver of that, but I know that the Department of Transportation obviously is intimately involved in it, but I don't know if the genesis of it generated out of the Department of Transportation. I would say no. I would say someone else wanted them and used the Department of Transportation in order to implement it.
So, right. So, okay. So one other question about your budget shortfall.
Yeah.
We used to have a saying where I worked that all savings walk on 2 feet.
Any other
Well,
unrelated?
George, before you go,
Yeah.
we've now had an emergency on homelessness for 21 years. And there does not seem to be a lot of urgency on this for the staff at San Jose. Some other people have begun taking action, some other departments. Santa Clara Valley Water seems to be doing an excellent job of cleaning up some of the waterways, but I don't get a sense of urgency. So there's 2 questions.
Sure.
Why isn't there a sense of urgency? And what incentive structure can you put in place to get people to not take 21 years to solve a problem?
Well, technically you're right. For 21 years, I guess lip service has been paid. to the issue. I would argue that only within the last several years, particularly with our mayor, Matt Mahan, have we in earnest actually deployed resources to the issue. I think ultimately the problem is, and we've seen this recently, we have an OLIVE program where they identified 30 locations throughout San Jose where RV parking is a problem and cars, folks living in their cars are a problem. And they identified 30 sites that they'll go out and abate, effectively say, you've got to move. Either you come into one of our services that we were providing or you have to move. Well, all that's done is now moved. For example, Chenoweth Avenue was where the initial this program started. Told all those folks they have to move, and all they did was go down the street and around the corner. And it's a similar scenario with our homeless population. We can have encampments, and we can offer them services and tell them they have to move and get out of here, but it's basically whack-a-mole. We'll hit them in this spot, they'll reform in another spot. So ultimately, we have to have an interim scenario, and whether it's sanctioned encampments where we identify a large swath of land where we'll provide sanitary services for them, wraparound services for them. But unless there is a place we can designate where they have to go or have consequences, be arrested, they're just gonna, like an amoeba, just kind of move around, move around, move around. So we're building, and in fact, we've built over the last, I think, 12 months, 1,000 units. And so we are making progress. The question I have and the concern I have, though, is how many more folks are coming in, and what are we doing as a city to incentivize folks to want to be homeless here? And what can we do to discourage that? I believe in accountability. I'm a compassionate person. We need to provide services for the unhoused, but there needs to be accountability on their part, and they need to seek out those services or they need to go elsewhere. So the key for me in my understanding of it is having a designated area where we can have a if or then scenario, like, or either you go here or there's consequences, and create a, where it's no longer, San Jose is no longer a comfortable place to be unhoused. And I hate to put it in those harsh terms, but I believe we're at that point now as a city. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say on a positive note, this past week, we had a lot of wind and rain as this atmospheric river ran through.
Right.
And we lost a rather large tree, came down and blocked half the road.
Oh, no.
And at 7 o'clock in the evening, we called the county and a human being answered the phone.
Oh, wow.
And they said, we'll have somebody out there first thing. And the next morning, a crew showed up. They took the tree away. You would never even know it was there.
Oh, right on.
So there's some things that do work.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'll tell you, before I got into this role, like you, very frustrated with the way the city operates. But I can tell you that there are some good folks working in our city. There are some folks that are committed. But we do have some issues that we need to suss out and deal with. But there are good, well-intended folks working and are civil servants. But we obviously can do better, and there need to be metrics, and there needs to be accountability, even, a sense of urgency, as was mentioned earlier. But there are good folks doing good work. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Fallon Hausman. That's my name. I live in the Calero neighborhood,
Okay.
and I live right in front of Oak Ridge Elementary. And over the past couple of months, there's been an alarming number of sideshows happening in front of the elementary school. This is my 4-year-old son, Milo. And thankfully, he was not playing in our yard nor in his bedroom as a car flew through our side yard. Okay. And so one of the things, with safety, I work at a school as well. I'm wondering what we are going to do and the city can do to address these dangerous sideshows that continuously happen. I think over the last week and a half, we've called the police 15 times.
Oh, wow. So Chief Joseph has a very good presentation on this. So we have been effective in addressing it in a number of areas. And in fact, we have it now as a city that even if you promote sideshows, there's an ordinance now where we can prosecute individuals. And we've had success arresting a number of folks. It's unfortunate, and I'm unaware of the fact, and I hope you'll reach out to my office too and let me know specifically.
Yep. We sent our pictures in.
Okay,
Yeah.
and this is recently?
Just a few weeks ago, I emailed a lady who works in your office. I don't remember her name, but she works on the transportation within your office. I can try and get her look up her name, but then she referred me over to the city, and I was emailing with some city planners about maybe suggesting putting in some of like the traffic circles with vegetation or other stuff, and they basically just came back and said, we have it noted that this is an area for investigation. And
no.
yeah, I mean, and,
That's-
and calling the police numerous times, they said, can you keep them there? I'm like, no, they're gonna. So I mean, I call and say, yeah, hey, there's, a dark, sedan doing a sideshow in the area. Can you send an officer in the area? I mean,
Well,
so-
let's define the terminology. Is it one car that just is kind of
multiple?
Okay.
Yeah,
'Cause
I mean,
a sideshow generally is like a significant amount
Sure.
of people too surrounding it.
I mean,
it's more difficult when it's smaller like that to kind of track it.
But I mean, the other night there were 5 cars.
Okay.
And so I opened my door and kind of confront them, and they kind of, ran away. But I
Right.
mean, it's for being in front of an elementary school,
Yeah.
consistently, doing donuts all the time,
Touch base with Hema from my department. What we'll do is we'll talk to our not chief, but Captain Donahue. And one of the things we can do is if you have cameras on your home, and if you can actually have we need, so if we could touch base, we'll talk to Captain Donahue. We'll actually talk to your neighbors around you. If we can just triangulate that area and find an opportunity to get license plates, because even after the fact, we can go out and the police and Captain Donahue will go out and address it after the fact. But we need the evidence.
Hang on.
Microphone. Don't.
Yep, no worries, no worries. If we can just get more patrols in the area, that, anybody's security camera for their house at night, it's gonna be tough to, pull plates and stuff.
Yeah.
But, we're all able to pick up people and triangulate areas where it's happening. And when I've called, I said, hey, can you send an officer just to patrol the area? And they've got, the modified exhaust, so you can hear them backfiring. So it's kind of obvious who it is if you can hear them coming.
Right.
So just the ability to, say, hey, there are these cars in our area. Can we have more officers in the area on a regular basis? It's tough to pinpoint whether it's at 10 o'clock or 3 a.m.,
Yeah.
but get more people in the area.
Unfortunately, and I think Charles is will chime in here. In terms of police officers, we're woefully understaffed. And it's unfortunate because it's a quality of life thing, right? You don't want to have to deal with that crap. And we spend a lot of money to live here, and the idea that that's something you ultimately have to endure is unacceptable. So as I mentioned, please reach out to him, and we'll talk to Captain Donahue, and we'll try to figure out a way to address this. But again, I have to shoot you straight. We just don't have enough police officers to come out and address that.
So George, we have 2 Zoom questions.
Okay.
First is the quick one. What is the status of the 4th of July fireworks and festival?
It's a great question. There are a number of folks that don't want it, and there's a number of folks that do want it. Being the council member that's responsible for it, I have some concerns, particularly given the fires that started and happened and the inability for firefighters and emergency services to access certain parts because of the congestion. We're looking to move forward and have it only if we can get a traffic, I guess what's the proper word? We're gonna have to hire folks to come out and control traffic, and we're gonna try to cut off neighborhood parking, prevent folks from parking in the neighborhood. So you'll have to show your ID in order to get into your home and shut off blocks. But unless we can solve that piece, unless we can have a safe 4th of July, I don't know that we'll move forward with it. But at the moment, we're trying to move forward. We're trying to put these mitigation measures in place, having traffic, what's the word I'm missing here? Anyway, it's a whole separate private company that we're looking and having conversations with to hire for them to handle the flow of traffic and prevent the congestion and prevent folks. The problem is folks will just park anywhere. And I'd hate to be the council member that's in charge when a fire happens and God forbid something were to go wrong and we couldn't get resources out there to them. So we're going to have it if we can do it safely.
Thank you. And the second question
Lake, yeah.
relates to, back to housing. But it was they were complicated, so I held them off, but I did say that we were going to ask them. So with the builders permits, I forgot the name, builders remedy things. Yeah. One, is there a affordable housing fragment for that or requirement for that? And then specifically, one person wanted information about a proposed project, and it was unclear whether that was a builder's remedy or not, on Cherry Avenue for the unhoused.
Oh, yeah.
And how that might impact residents during construction and other oversight and governance of the housing, et cetera, et cetera.
So for the builders remedy projects, it has to be a housing project, and 20% of the units need to be originally, as it was drafted, for low income housing, whether for sale or for rent. The new laws for 2025, you still have to have 20% of them designated for affordable housing, but they're no longer all required to be low income. So there's moderately low, there's these little scales, but 20% of them have to be affordable housing. And the second question was the Cherry project.
The Cherry project.
That is an EIH development for the unhoused. And the way it's supposed to work is there is a significant unhoused population in that area. Those folks are to be put into the EIH developments, and then there'll be an abatement within a 1.5 mile radius around that development where folks can't come back and encamp for the first week or so. But then ultimately within 2 blocks of that area, there's a no encampment, no return zone. So ideally, it should help the community, whereas folks were unhoused and out in the public, now they'll be housed and no other folks should be allowed to return, particularly within a 2 block radius and initially within a 1.5 mile radius. Fred.
So on that note of inviting the unhoused into the area,
yeah,
what is the latest on the Sobrato?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have to get back to you. I haven't heard, and I know Via Del Oro, they're moving forward, and it's supposed to be, gosh, either this month or next month that they've completed the upgrade and the additional units. It's been a second since I've actually dealt with Sobrato, but I'll get back to you on Sobrato.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. But Fred, I suspect they're moving forward. I just don't know what the status is. I don't leave you hanging, but I'll get back to you shortly. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So I wanted to add on to Dylan and Oliver. So we're their neighbors. We live 2 houses down from them.
Okay.
They actually moved in long after we've had many other problems where we've had speeding vehicles crash into a car and into a tree and split in half. One half of the person or the person was rushed off to the hospital basically and had to have emergency brain surgery by our neighbor who was one of the nurses.
Wow.
We've had bullets fly in to the house across the street from us where a child was living at the time. We've had a neighbor between the 2 of us, his house caught on fire one 4th of July. We've had his car stolen multiple times and broken into. We've had, in fact, you responded to me before the election because we were the house with the RVs on the side.
Right.
We've had a lot of stuff happen, and
Yeah.
I've gone multiple times to our local captain, and we're not getting enough presence in the area.
Yeah.
And I just would like to see more light shed on what's happening and how we can solve these problems because it's really bad in that area and it shouldn't be.
So back when we were the safest big city in the nation, these types of things didn't occur because we had the police officers. I mean, they at times were a visual deterrent. Seeing a police officer makes you think twice about doing anything. I think it's even more demonstrable if you look at Santa Teresa Boulevard, Almaden Expressway, just how fast people drive now, right? Because there's just no visual deterrent. There's no consequences. So I think at the root of the problem is we need more police officers. We need to hire 400 to 500 more police officers. If we had that type of manpower, gal power out and about, then this wouldn't be happening. So we're strained as a department. And so getting out to all these issues and problems, we just don't have the manpower to do so. Right.
Just having the presence is not enough.
Right.
The RV that was on the side of our house. Yeah, the police showed up. They did their job. They were really good.
Yeah.
But they couldn't do anything. So where is the repercussion for them? They knew the guy that was driving the RV.
Right. Because he's
They knew that
all,
he didn't
all
have
over.
a driver's license.
Yeah.
They know that he didn't have stickers paying taxes. They know he had a motorcycle stolen on the back of his vehicle.
Right.
They knew that he was renting the RV that he was towing, but they couldn't move him.
Yeah.
So then something needs to be
Well,
done about that.
big part of the problem is, and we're trying through, so we have at our city, an intergovernmental agency that goes to Sacramento and lobbies on our behalf. So a big part of the issue here is by law, we can't move certain vehicles if they've got bio waste or any type of waste to them. We're trying to change those laws to give us the authority to move them. The other issue is, say we arrest that guy, what are we going to do with the vehicle, right? We're going to impound it, and then it's a cost to us to sell it or get rid of it. No one's going to buy it. In many instances, they've seen their best days. And so I can assure you, because I've been in several meetings just in the month and a half, 2 months that I've been at city council, this is a huge concern for us and a huge concern, obviously, for the constituents. We're trying to figure out how we can get the authority to tow cars or RVs like that have that body waste, and then figure out how we can dispose of them and get rid of them. We've looked at acreage that we have where we can store them potentially, and then figure it out later, but just get as many of them off the street as possible to discourage folks from coming out. Again, we don't do much to disincentivize folks from doing that, right? So unless consequences, but the big piece is trying to figure out legally by state law, we can't move those cars if they got waste in them. If we did arrest that guy and take him out, that car's still there. So we need to have a place to take these cars as well. So the first piece is getting the right to be able to move the cars. The second one is figuring out where we're going to take them to dispose of them. So I wish I had a better answer for you, and I apologize that you're having to deal with that. But these are some structural issues that we're confronting, and ultimately there is no accountability for a number of folks in this antisocial behavior that we're having to endure. We're going to have to figure out a way to create consequences, and until we do that, we're not going to disincentivize folks from coming in. And
So George,
absolutely.
we continue to have people on Zoom, and they continue to have questions.
Oh, wow.
Two more.
They haven't gone to sleep yet.
Two more. They'll be quick, I hope. When will we have another Art and Wine Festival in Almaden Valley?
We had one not too long ago, right? We have one every year. Yeah. At the Almaden Lake, right? Yeah. Offhand, I don't know, but if you guys can reach out to my office, we'll give you a definitive date.
And then the second question is, how can we work with the landlord at the Via Valenti Shopping Center to allow another grocery store to help our area?
So that's a great question, and one I've encountered often. The reality is they're a private landowner, and we can't tell them what to do with their land. I suspect, and it's my understanding, that some time ago they wanted to develop, and gosh, they should have used the builder's remedy if they wanted to do something, and it looks like they missed that window. But I think they wanted to do some sort of development, weren't able to do so. It's my understanding now that the people that own the property, they don't even take the money from the rents that they're generating now. It's been donated to Stanford Hospital or somewhere else, and they're absentee owners. So what's that? Catholic Charities. Unless it's a blight issue or they're breaking some sort of law, there's nothing we can do to force them to lease out to somebody unless we create, like San Francisco and a number of other municipalities have considered, and I think it may have even implemented, finding or taxing people for having vacancies. But I don't know that the city has the appetite or the will to do anything like that. Yeah.
Microphone.
Gary's got you.
Yeah, it is a blight issue. There have been glass broken in that supermarket area. Some of the stores have been vandalized there. There's plywood, trying to keep them together. It really is terrible. And it's been going on for at least, what, 15 years?
Oh gosh, I think
So-
even longer than that, right? There used to be the PW was there many years ago. Yeah, again, you know, blight, I guess it's like pornography. I guess it's the eye of the beholder, right? I don't know if it legally is at what we would consider blight. I'm the new council member. I can reach out and have a conversation and see where they are and what they plan on doing. But again, our hands are tied when it's a private landowner. It'd be like someone coming and dictating to you what you do with your house or how you manage it. Yeah.
I have a little bit of information. The roof of the Via Valenti space is full of termites, and the companies that would rent it don't want to pay for it. The landowner wants them to pay for a new roof, and that's one of the problems.
So it's slumlord too. There was a comment back here about eminent domain. That's also a high hurdle. We'd have to establish a public use that we're going to use it for. And I don't know that, again, talking to a real estate attorney and a property rights advocate, I don't know if we want to get down that slippery slope of just taking people's property that we don't agree with what they're doing.
I know, I'm hearing about the, car thing and running into people's houses, and we just had a stabbing across the street. Guy walking down, I'm afraid to ride my bike there by myself at this point because somebody was stabbed. My neighbor's car was broken into down there. So my question is, we don't have enough police officers, I get it. Difficulty hiring, I get it. But you are entrusted to solve the problem. So I'm gonna suggest that we could even use, focused police showing up, like when they used to come to the four-way stop and everybody gets a ticket for not stopping. Just periodically, police presence. If they can't be out here all the time, pick a time, periodically, show up in the area that's really bad so that people are afraid to show up. Do it a couple times, then they can't do it forever. But we need to solve the problem until we can hire.
I guess the problem is, again, 181 square miles. They're doing it. It's just hard to notice it. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news. No one's crying for Almaden Valley compared to the other parts of the city. And that's just the harsh. No, you're calling me all the time, but I mean, in terms of the other districts, the other council members and the city as a whole, relative to some of the issues that other parts of San Jose are having in terms of crime and violent crime, we just don't rank as a problem area. And I think there's also a bias towards the fact that it's considered a wealthier area, and not just Almaden Valley, Blocks, but this part of San Jose is considered wealthy and not worthy of some of the concern that other more impacted areas are getting. But to the crux of the issue, so one of the things I like to do, and one of the reasons why we aren't getting police officers, there was the defund the police nonsense and all that made being a police officer no longer as attractive. So we're not getting as many recruits to come out to be police officers. But a critical component of this is the housing piece. It's expensive to live here. So one of the goals that I have, and it's a top priority for me, is to figure out a way to have housing, subsidized housing for police officers. And I'm approaching at the moment the pension fund to be the source of funding for it, the San Jose's police pension fund. They already allocate 5% of their fund into real estate investments. So we're trying to figure out through their charter whether they're precluded from making these types of investments, and I'm dealing with the city attorney. But the goal is to, if we solve that piece, I think we'll incentivize folks to come be police officers if they know that, because our salary is a decent salary. It's the cost of living that's making it unattractive to be a police officer here for a lot of folks. So if we can solve that housing piece, that's just as a rental option. The other thing I'd like to do is have a down payment assistance program for police officers. The problem is you can't, there's federal law though that prevents a private owner from only giving it to one group or the other. But as a public agency, you have employee housing. Employers can do it if you're doing employee housing, and we can do it as a public. I'm going to figure out a way for us to be able to do it. But I think if we solve that piece, we'll start getting more police officers here.
Okay.
I'd just like to come in and thank Councilmember Casey for his time. Thank all of you for coming out. I know that there are a lot of questions about the police department right now, so we actually had the police chief here last month. So if you would like to check out the recording, it is on the AVCA Facebook. And quick plug on, we always host our meetings at the AVCA on the second Monday of the month, which would be March 10th for the next month and we will be hosting San Jose Fire Chief Robert Sapien. Thank you all for your time and hope you have a great night.
All for coming out, staying so long. Very impressive. Thank you.
Many people want to speak without a microphone, and then they keep pushing the button.